Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. Skyler called me just after 11 that night. The music behind her was so loud I could barely hear her breathing, but I recognized the panic in her voice before she said my name. Kevin, please, just listen to me. I stayed quiet. We can talk when I get home, she rushed on. Please don't do anything until I get back. I leaned against the kitchen counter and looked at the envelope sitting in the middle of the table. I already did something, I said. You're just too far away to see it. She went silent. Then she whispered, What does that mean? It means you're too late. Her breathing got heavier. Kevin, where's Liam? He's spending the weekend with your sister. He doesn't belong anywhere near this. A few seconds passed before she spoke again. You know, don't you? I know enough. Her voice cracked. It isn't what you think. I laughed once, but there wasn't any humor in it. That's funny. The evidence says otherwise. She started crying. I made a mistake. No, I said. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did took planning. Please, she begged. We can fix this. You should have thought about fixing it before you got on that plane. I ended the call before she could answer. The house was quiet again. I looked around the kitchen one last time. 4 years of memories lived inside those walls, but none of them mattered anymore. The funny thing was, I never expected my marriage to end like that. When I met Skyler, she was nothing like the woman who had just called me from Las Vegas. I was 39, running a small construction company and living a simple life. She worked as a sales manager for a medical supply company. She was confident, organized, and the kind of woman who looked you in the eye when she spoke. She also had a 6-year-old son named Liam. The first time I met him, he walked straight up to me holding a toy truck and asked, Do you know how to build real houses? I smiled. I do. That was the beginning of everything. For the first 2 years, life felt steady. Skyler and I bought a house outside Nashville with a fenced backyard where Liam could play. I taught him how to throw a baseball, helped him build a treehouse, and took him fishing whenever I had a free Saturday. Skyler always smiled when she watched us together. I never thought he'd have someone like you, she told me once. I believed her. Then things started changing. It wasn't one big moment. It was 100 small ones. She stayed late at work more often. Her phone was always face down. New dresses showed up in the closet with price tags already removed. If I asked about her day, she'd give me one-word answers before disappearing into another room. I paid attention, but I didn't accuse her of anything. Then one Friday evening, she walked into the kitchen holding her phone. I'm going to Vegas next month, she said. Just a girls' trip. 3 nights. She didn't ask. She informed me. I looked up from the papers I was reading. Who's going? Me, Ashley, Brooke, and a couple of women from work. Vegas? Yes. I nodded slowly. I don't like it. She folded her arms. Why? Because you've been acting different for months. Now you suddenly want to fly to Vegas without your husband. She let out a sharp laugh. So now I need permission. I didn't say that. You don't trust me. I trust actions. Yours have changed. Her face hardened. I'm going. I figured. She stepped closer. You don't get to control me, Kevin. I've never tried to. Good, she snapped. Because I'm going whether you like it or not. I stood up and looked her straight in the eyes. You're free to make your own decisions. She smiled like she'd won. But understand something, I continued. Every decision comes with consequences. Don't act surprised if this one does too. She grabbed her purse. You're being ridiculous. Without another word, she walked out and slammed the front door. I waited until I heard her car disappear down the street. Then I picked up my phone. A friend from work had once given me the number of a private investigator named Samuel Dawson. He answered on the second ring. This is Samuel. My name is Kevin, I said. My wife is going to Las Vegas next month. There was a brief pause. I think I need someone to find out why she's so determined to go. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He simply replied, When does her flight leave? 3 days later, I met Samuel Dawson at a quiet coffee shop across town. He looked to be in his early 50s. Plain jacket, clean haircut, nothing about him stood out. I figured that was the point. He listened without interrupting while I explained everything. I don't want assumptions, I told him. I want facts. Samuel nodded once. That's all I deal in. I slid a photo of Skyler across the table along with her flight information and the hotel where she and her friends were staying. If she's telling the truth, I said, I'll apologize for ever doubting her. And if she isn't, I'll know exactly what to do. He tucked everything into a folder. I'll keep you updated. The morning of the trip, Skylar acted happier than she had in months. She rolled her suitcase to the front door while Liam hugged her goodbye. "I'll bring you something cool," she told him. He grinned. "A giant cowboy hat?" She laughed. "I'll see what I can do." Then she looked at me. "Still upset?" I said what I needed to say. She walked over and kissed my cheek. "Try not to miss me too much." "I'll manage." She studied my face for a second, probably expecting another argument. She didn't get one. I loaded her suitcase into the car, watched her drive away, and went back inside. Around 1 that afternoon, my phone finally buzzed. She landed. Following now, the first updates were exactly what you'd expect. She met 3 women in the hotel lobby. They checked into their rooms, lunch, shopping, a casino. Nothing unusual. By evening, another message came. She just left her friends, walking toward another hotel alone. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A photo. Skylar was standing outside a restaurant with a man I'd never seen before. He wasn't part of the girls' trip. They hugged. The next picture showed them holding hands as they crossed the street. I felt my jaw tighten, but I stayed calm. An hour later, Samuel called. "I thought you'd want to hear this directly." "I'm listening." "They're acting like a couple. Dinner, drinks, laughing. This isn't 2 people meeting by accident." I didn't say anything. "There will probably be more before the night's over," he added. "There already is," I replied. "What's that?" "Enough." I was wrong. An hour later, Samuel emailed 12 photographs and 2 short videos. The last image showed Skylar and the man stepping into the same hotel elevator. Neither of them came back down. I watched every photo once. Then I closed my laptop. There was no reason to torture myself by looking again. I had hired Samuel to find the truth, and he had done exactly that. The next morning, I walked into the office of divorce attorney Michael Bennett carrying a folder with every photo, video, and report Samuel had sent. Michael spent less than 10 minutes reviewing everything. He looked up and asked, "Is there anything else I should know?" "No." "Any chance you want to work this out?" "No." He nodded like he'd already expected the answer. "Then let's not waste time." For the next hour, we went over everything. The house would have to be sold, and we'd split the equity. Our retirement accounts would stay separate, and there wasn't much else for either of us to fight over financially. Michael closed the file. "This is straightforward. I'll file today. I want the papers ready before she gets home." He smiled slightly. "That can be arranged." When I left his office, I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. There was a difference. I spent the rest of the day getting my life in order. I packed the clothes and personal things I wanted to keep. I moved them to the cabin my grandfather had left me years earlier, about 40 minutes outside the city. Then I drove back home. I didn't throw anything across the room. I didn't break pictures. I didn't leave an angry note. That wasn't who I was. The following afternoon, Michael called. "Everything's ready." An hour later, I picked up the packet. Inside were the divorce papers, financial disclosures, and instructions for the next steps. I drove home, walked into the kitchen, and placed the envelope in the exact center of the table. You couldn't miss it if you tried. Right beside it, I set my wedding ring. I stood there for a few seconds looking around the room. That kitchen had seen birthdays, Christmas mornings, family dinners, and homework with Liam. Now it was just another room. As I reached the front door, my phone rang. It was Samuel. "I thought you should know," he said. "She's with him again." I looked back at the envelope on the table. "She can spend the rest of the trip however she wants." I opened the front door. It won't change what's waiting for her when she gets home. That night, my phone started buzzing just after 11. I looked at the screen. Skylar. I let it ring. An hour earlier, Samuel had called me. "I think your wife knows someone's been watching her," he said. "What happened?" "One of her friends noticed me twice, once outside the restaurant, then again at the casino. She joked that I must have had a crush on someone in their group." "And Skylar?" "She stopped laughing, started looking around. I'd bet she figured out someone was following her. A minute later, she pulled out her phone." He paused. "I have a feeling she's about to call you." He was right. She called again. Then again. By the 5th call, I answered. The first thing I heard was loud music and people shouting somewhere behind her. "Kevin," she said, breathing hard. "Please don't hang up." "I'm listening." "You hired someone to follow me." It wasn't a question. "It seems that way." "Why would you do that?" I leaned back in the chair at my cabin. "Because you gave me a reason. You invaded my privacy." I almost laughed. You lost the right to complain about privacy the second you started lying to me. She didn't answer. Then she lowered her voice. It wasn't supposed to happen. So it happened. Silence. Kevin. No. Answer the question. Another long pause. Yes? It was the first honest thing she'd said in months. I made a mistake, she whispered. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. You didn't make one mistake. You planned a trip, fought with me about it, met another man, and spent the night with him. None of that was an accident. She started crying. It didn't mean anything. I've heard that excuse before. We can fix this. No. For Liam's sake. I am thinking about Liam. She took a shaky breath. Please don't do anything until I get home. I looked through the cabin window at the dark trees outside. I already have. What does that mean? It means your trip changed more than you realize. Her breathing became faster. Kevin, what did you do? I talked to a lawyer. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. You filed? I did. She sounded like all the air had left her lungs. No, Kevin, please. You wanted complete freedom. I was drunk. You booked that flight sober. It was one night. You spent weeks fighting for that trip. Then you looked me in the eye and told me you were going whether I liked it or not. Don't pretend this just happened. Her crying got louder. I'll come home tomorrow. I know. Can we at least talk? We will. When? When you open the envelope waiting on the kitchen table. I ended the call before she could say another word. She tried calling back 6 more times. I didn't answer a single one. There wasn't anything left to discuss. By then, the truth had already done all the talking that needed to be done. The next morning, Skyler booked the earliest flight home. Samuel texted me once before noon. She checked out early. Looks like she's headed to the airport. I replied with 2 words. Thanks again. That was the last message we exchanged. I wasn't waiting at the house when she arrived. Instead, I picked Liam up from school and took him to his Aunt Melissa's place like I had promised. He climbed out of my truck with his backpack hanging off one shoulder. Is Mom home yet? He asked. She'll be home soon. Are we all having dinner tonight? I forced a small smile. Not tonight, buddy. He nodded, gave me a hug, and ran inside. Melissa looked at me from the doorway. You sure about this? I've never been more sure. She didn't ask another question. By the time I pulled into the driveway, Skyler's car was already there. The front door stood half open. Inside, the house was silent. She was sitting at the kitchen table with the envelope opened in front of her. The divorce papers were spread across the table like she had read every page twice. Her eyes were swollen. When she looked up, she didn't look angry. She looked defeated. Kevin, she said quietly, please. I set my truck keys on the counter. You found them. You already filed. Yes. She stood up so quickly the chair scraped across the floor. You didn't even wait for me to explain. I met her eyes. I waited long enough. Tears rolled down her face. It wasn't supposed to happen. You planned the trip for a month. I mean, him. You met him because you wanted to. She shook her head. I was drinking. Everyone was having fun. I wasn't thinking. I stepped closer. No, Skyler. You were thinking. You just thought I'd never find out. She covered her face with both hands. I'm sorry. I believe you. She looked up, surprised. You do? I believe you're sorry you got caught. She stared at me without saying a word. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my house key, and placed it beside the papers. I'm moving to my cabin. What about us? There isn't an us anymore. What about Liam? We'll handle that like adults. He deserves better than lies. She took one step toward me. Please don't leave. I picked up the last box I'd packed the day before. I already did. Without raising my voice, I walked past her, out the front door, and closed it behind me. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking away from my problems. I was walking away from the person who caused them. The divorce moved faster than Skyler expected. Michael Bennett handled everything exactly the way he said he would. The evidence Samuel gathered left very little to argue about. There were no dramatic courtroom scenes, no surprise witnesses, and no last-minute confessions. Just paperwork and facts. Skyler tried every approach she could think of. One week she'd call to apologize. I know I destroyed your trust, Kevin. I just want one chance to make it right. The next week she'd get angry. You hired someone to spy on me. Do you know how humiliating that was? My answer never changed. You made your choices. I made mine. Eventually the call stopped. The man from Vegas didn't stay around either. A few weeks after the divorce was filed, one of Skyler's co-workers, Rachel Simmons, ran into me at a hardware store. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," she said, "but that guy from Vegas found out Skyler was married." I looked at her. "And?" "He blocked her. Apparently, she told him she was divorced." I nodded once. "I figured he'd leave." Rachel sighed. She thought he was going to start a relationship with her. Looks like he had different plans. That was the end of the conversation. Life slowly settled into a routine again. I moved permanently into my cabin. It was quieter than the house, but it felt honest. Nothing there reminded me of broken promises. I still saw Liam. Melissa brought him over every other weekend. We'd fish, work on old engines, or spend the afternoon building things in the workshop. I never spoke badly about Skyler in front of him. He deserved better than that. One afternoon, while Liam was outside trying to catch frogs by the pond, Melissa sat across from me on the porch. "I need to tell you something." I waited. Skyler admitted this wasn't the first time she'd crossed the line. She cheated on someone before she ever met you. I looked out toward the water. "I believe it. You don't seem surprised." "I'm not." She frowned. "Doesn't that make you angry?" "No, it really didn't. Anger would have meant I was still carrying the marriage around with me. I wasn't. By then, I had already put it down. About 4 months after the divorce was finalized, I saw Skyler again. It happened on a Saturday morning outside a home improvement store. I had just loaded lumber into the back of my truck when I heard my name. "Kevin." I turned around. She looked different. Not because of her clothes. She wore jeans and a gray sweatshirt. It was her face. She looked tired. The confidence she used to carry was gone. She walked over slowly and stopped a few feet away. "Can we talk for a minute?" "I've got a minute." She looked down before meeting my eyes. "I've wanted to ask you something." "Go ahead." "Did you really have to do it like that?" "Do what?" "The papers." She swallowed, leaving them on the kitchen table while I was gone. I held her gaze. "You expected to come home and convince me to forgive you." She didn't answer. "You thought if you cried enough or apologized enough, I'd change my mind." "I just wanted the chance to explain." "You already had that chance." "When?" "The day you told me you were going to Vegas." She looked confused. I continued. "I told you I wasn't comfortable with it. We argued. You looked me in the eye and said, 'I'm going whether you like it or not.'" She slowly nodded. "That was your explanation." Tears filled her eyes. "I wish I could take it back." "I know. I was selfish." "You were." She wiped her face. "I lost everything." I shook my head. "No, Skyler." She looked at me. "You traded everything." Those words hit harder than anything else I'd said. She stood there without an answer. After a long silence, she quietly asked, "Do you hate me?" I thought about it for a second. "No." "You don't?" "Hating you would mean you're still taking up space in my life." She lowered her eyes. "I don't have room for that anymore." I climbed into my truck and started the engine. Before I pulled away, I rolled down the window one last time. "I hope one day you become the person you told me you were when we first met." She didn't say anything. She just stood there watching as I drove away. As I headed home to the cabin, I realized something. The night Skyler called me from Las Vegas, she thought she was trying to save our marriage. The truth was, there wasn't a marriage left to save. She ended it the moment she decided that trip to Las Vegas was worth more than the life we had built together. The divorce papers weren't revenge. They were simply the final page of a story she had already finished writing. And for the first time in a long time, I drove home with nothing on my mind except the road ahead. Thank you for watching.